This is not the Stanford team of old. Boston College should beat them easily, but will they?
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over 10 years. If you're looking for news, analysis, and details on your Eagles, you are in the right place. Locked On Boston College is a daily Boston College podcast available 5 days a week free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Today, we have a big episode. It's a episode to get into the Stanford Cardinal, and I dug deep. I looked through and found the best possible analyst to get into the Stanford Cardinal, and we're going to be talking about that today. On today's show, we're going to look at their defense. Is it okay? The offense, and wow, how brutal that looks. And we're going to take a wide lens of a program and get the realistic expectation of what this team should be like. And so we have a Stanford football expert. I want to bring them in. Who is my Stanford football expert today? Reveal yourself.
Well, hi, AJ. It's good to meet you. It's good for my first time being on this podcast. Definitely, I've never actually been on any other podcast. This is my first one ever. I hope my audio is okay. I just, threw together some stuff to try to get this to work. So I'm happy to be on and happy to talk about Stanford football, a team that I follow extremely closely and I'm very excited to talk about despite how they've started this season.
Okay. All right, turn your camera on.
All right.
We have Mitch. So to give you a little context, Boston College themselves just gets a lot of garbage for not having people that actually cover. It's like me, Trevor, Kevin, and Graham, and that's about it, right? And Rich. I got to tell you, we had on Jackson Moore to talk about Stanford, and he decided he took a new job to not cover Stanford, to cover just Oregon recruiting. So he's gone. There is nobody covering Stanford anymore. They do not exist. I could not find and I was talking to Brett Ryder and Mac Hutchinson about this. They're like, we tried, we couldn't find anyone either. I'm like, I don't know where they are. So honestly, Mitch Wolf is probably the most knowledgeable guy that we're going to have. So, Mitch, you're our Stanford guy today. Let's talk about Stanford.
Man, it's finally what I've been waiting for my entire life. I'm very excited to get into venture capital, tech startups, definitely not child labor or anything like that.
All right, let's get into Stanford. So this offseason was an absolute whirlwind for that program. End of March, they fire Troy Taylor after allegations of all sorts of things, bullying and inappropriate things going on.
For what it's worth, I think it was Cover 3 podcast of CBS Sports. I think they said, if you ask around, I think the phrase was equal opportunity a-hole was ascribed to Troy Taylor. So, I think he's suing ESPN for defamation at this point. Not sure exactly how that's going, obviously, but yeah, I mean, I think it just wasn't going well, and then they were able to maybe get some cause, and then they're like, let's just try to move on here.
So I think a lot of our listeners are trapped in the Stanford team of old. Like, they go back to the Andrew Luck as a player time, and back in those times when Stanford was just a hard out. It seems like since NIL has kicked in, Stanford is way behind the curve. Like, they're just, I don't know what's going on there. Mitch, what have you...
I think even pre-COVID, it was kind of starting to turn. Like, you had a few guys here and there. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey in 2015, like, they're still cooking there. But once you got a few years into the David Shaw tenure, it really started to turn against them. And I think that NIL's part of it, the portal's part of it, and Stanford faces a lot of the same issues for what it's worth, much better climate, obviously, than BC. And you are going to a more academically rigorous school, better connections on the West Coast, but it is harder to get into. It's harder to work at. You can't cut as many corners at Stanford as you can even at a place like BC, where it's hard to do, relative to the rest of the schools in FBS college football. So that was a problem for them. And you just started to see them lose their way. I think you saw a lot of the other big programs start coming into California and just plucking kids. You saw Alabama do it. You saw Ohio State do it. And you can even see it, how it goes with, USC and UCLA and how those programs have kind of fallen off. And obviously Oregon has played a role in their ability to just throw money at every problem, which has worked out for them, to their credit. So I think there's a lot of things with Stanford where, and even like you have Jim Harbaugh, who's a very good football coach, and you're able to establish this identity. And frankly, if you look at the rest of Stanford football, that is a blip with how they've done. They've had good times in the past, but that was a different time of college football. And now, as you get into the modern era, where guys are not as focused on very academic schools, they want to go to places where they can win and play in high-profile games. And when you had Harbaugh, that was great, and it was all rolling together. But then you lose him, you lose players, and it's just hard to keep that momentum going when you're a program like Stanford, when you have all these external obstacles that are going against you.
Yeah, and you look at where things have gone, and it's a team that seems like it's completely lost in this new world. Like you don't, as I just said, you don't hear about Stanford in any sense with any major buzz. Like the recruiting, they're behind. On the field, they're behind. They don't have a coach right now. I don't know if they're going to keep Frank Reich but I think the only thing that they have going for them, at least in their perspective, is they got Andrew Luck running things. And I know he's obviously a big name in Stanford history, but like, is there anything going on with this program? Like they had a couple guys last year. Eric, how do you say his last name? Alamayor, is that right?
Oh, Alec Ayomanor. Yeah, he was the receiver who got drafted by the Titans.
David Bailey,
good player, transfer Texas Tech. He's going to be a player there. They lost They lost two more offensive line transfers, or actually three. Two went to Oklahoma. They had another receiver who transferred to Texas. I think he hasn't played yet due to injury, so that's another one. And they're Stanford, so they still had a few tight ends here and there. But like they had a guy like Benjamin Urasek, who was a really good tight end. Fun fact: his grandfather invented the baby carrot at Colorado State University, but he transferred to Georgia after that kind of fell off. They've had some quarterbacks here and there. Tanner McKee, the backup for the Eagles, Davis Mills, the backup for the Texans, but they've never just really been able to put it all together. And I think they've had a few defensive players here and there. But yeah, I mean, they've had a few guys, but it's just hard for them to sustain. I think, kind of like how it happened with BC. BC was luckily to kind of able to get out of it a little bit. But when, COVID hits and the portal and the NIL is all this big conflagration for them, and obviously the Pac-12 falling apart plays a role as well. So you've got all these things happening, and for a program, like I said, with all these, I guess they're more internal obstacles of, academically rigorous, it's, you're in San Francisco, but you're in Palo Alto, and you're not, the LA school, and you don't have all the money being thrown. You have you're a university that's throwing a ton of money at Olympic sports because they want to win. What is that? The Capital One Commissioner's Cup or whatever it is, that like, it's all the championships of all the Olympic sports, and everything. Like they care a lot about that. They don't they would like to win in football, obviously, but I don't think they want to do it at the expense of the Olympic sports.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, this is a team too that does have a slight history with BC. They played at home and home in the early 2000s, around the time when I was there. BC, and both teams took the home game. But, you're moving forward now. You have Frank Reich, who has a history with Bill O'Brien. The two of them were both in the AFC South, with Reich with the Colts, obviously with O'Brien with the Texans. Do you think Frank Reich is a long-term solution for them, or is this a guy that is just going to do a one-year deal and book on out of there?
The entire indication of this seems to indicate that it is a one-year deal, that he is basically doing a favor for Andrew Luck, and those two are very close. I believe Frank Reich officiated Andrew Luck's wedding. He came in during Andrew Luck's really one-year career resurgence towards the end, because that happened, and then he got hurt again, and then basically retired out of the blue. So they're just very close, and Reich obviously was kind of between jobs, and Luck was like, hey, we're having this weird thing, like, can you just come for a year? And Reich said, sure. And I think that for him to get the interim tag taken off long-term, they would have to win a lot of games. And frankly, just looking at this roster, looking at, I'm trying to pull up, I'm looking at this schedule, it's not that, well, actually, it's looking a little harder than I thought. But yeah, it's not that easy of a schedule. So it's just hard to find a path where it's like, yeah, he's going to be able to impress the brass enough where he can get hired long term, where it's like, okay, like if he goes is 4-8 enough for him to keep this job? That just doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
And the thing is though, like, are they going to be able to attract good candidates? Like,
I mean, I think a lot of people thought Troy Taylor was a good candidate. Like, he kind of started making Sacramento State into a thing, and now they've hired Brennan Marion, who's the kind of high profile offense coordinator with the go-go offense, who was at UNLV the previous year. He was the wide receivers coach at Texas, at Pitt when they had the big year with Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison. So he's now at Sacramento State, and they're trying to get into the Pac-12 and get into FBS. So he kind of started all that, and he was the guy who found Cam Scadaboo and all that stuff. So you see, you understood the vision with Taylor. He was a West Coast guy. I think he was at Utah before a lot, so it made sense. But then it wasn't working. Again, probably not necessarily his fault as terms of the program stuff, everything external in college football. And then he just was struggling, couldn't get guys there, and then it all really fell apart. So I'm sure you'll be able to find them, but again, it is going to be tough. You wonder about maybe like a guy like is this a place that would hire Jeff Monken away from Army? Just because that's another school where you have some weird things, and it's Stanford. Like, run the triple, have some, like, try some, like, I mean, Rice is running the triple. I think Central Michigan is running some variant. I think they hired Army's offensive coordinator, so it's not exactly the triple, but it's pretty much the triple. But if you're Stanford, like, why not run the triple? Like, you kind of need weird athletes anyways, like, go all in, and it's not exactly the Harbaugh run the ball offense, but it's tangential where you're just gonna be, hey, we're gonna beat people up and we can win that way.
All right, in a moment, I want to talk to Mitch about the offense. They have a quarterback that, let's just say, is struggling quite a bit. We'll talk about who that is and what's going on there in just a moment. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more money every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Boston College, it's Dylan Lonergan. He delivered in a big way, scoring 4 touchdowns and leading BC into overtime and double overtime, where unfortunately they lost. When the pressure was on, Lonergan came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance wasn't a fluke. Lonergan is on a streak. And just like Dylan Lonergan delivered for the Eagles, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday on your order. Stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo code available through 11/18. The Charitable Irish Society has been part of Boston's history since 1737, making it the oldest Irish society in the Americas. With deep ties to Boston College, its leaders and members continue a proud tradition of service. Today, the society is still living its mission, raising thousands of dollars each year to help immigrants in need, Irish and non-Irish alike. Last year, their support helped a family from Northern Ireland who faced a medical crisis and couldn't cover rent and bills. You can be part of the impact. Membership is just $75 a year, and it goes directly to helping families when they need it most. And mark your calendar, the annual Silver Key Dinner is coming up October 29th at the UMass Club, honoring Archbishop Henning. Get your tickets at the annual Silver Key Dinner and join the Charitable Irish Society today at www.charitableirishsociety.org. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. Thank you to all who have made Locked On Boston College your first listen every single day. This podcast is growing every single week, and I want to thank each and every one of you. Now, before we get into more Stanford, it was interesting talking about the Irish Society. I don't know if you got to hear Seamus Florio today talking about his Irish roots, and that there was actually a connection between him and Andy Quinn. I think the Quinns took out the Florios in Ireland, which I thought was
I did see that they were there. I thought that Seamus's parents visited, which was pretty cool.
Yeah. So there's we've always joked about our Irish connection in the special teams unit, and to hear that they're actually
the Catholic connection. Don't forget the Italians.
Yes. Yep.
Luca Lombardo.
Yeah. So let's talk about the offense. That quarterback situation. How ugly is it?
It's bad. There's no real other way to put it. It is. I don't think it's far-fetched to say this is the worst quarterback situation in the entire country. I've got some. When I was planning on this little bit we were doing, I was going to lead this up by saying I'm not like a big stats guy, and then I was just going to launch into all these crazy stats. But now it's me, so people have come to expect this. So minimum of 15 dropbacks. Ben Nickel Branson has the worst Pro Football Focus passing grade in the FBS at 29.8 out of 100. The next closest is Louisiana Monroe's Walker Howard at 34.1. Gulbranson has thrown no touchdowns. He's thrown 3 interceptions. He has 1 big-time throw to 6 turnover-worthy plays, and he's only completed 50% of his passes despite having an average depth of target of 5.5 yards, which is the 10th lowest among FBS quarterbacks with at least 15 dropbacks. This offense has the 2nd worst passing success rate in the Power 4 behind Kentucky at 29.4%. Kentucky just benched their starter, who is also a 7th-year quarterback, Zach Calzada, and they have the 2nd worst EPA per dropback in the FBS, overall the worst Power 5, but it's 2nd worst in the FBS behind Rice, who is running the triple. This is a terrible passing offense. Ben Gulbranson is, when I watch him, he has the thing that when you watch a quarterback, you say, oh no, this is bad, where you can tell he's very afraid of pressure. He is antsy in the pocket. If there's pressure coming, he will kind of fold and turn away from it, which is, you're like, okay, this is bad. Yeah. And the offensive line isn't necessarily terrible, but they do allow a decent amount of pressure. Their pressure rate is it's basically the same as Michigan State's. But he is not very mobile. They try to roll him out on play action bootlegs a bit, but he's nowhere near the athlete Aiden Childs is. And it's rough. I mean, even the receivers have not been very good. They have a tight end, Sam Roush, who going into the season, he had some nice numbers, but he has been targeted 11 times and only has 4 catches for 8 yards. But he has 1 drop. CJ Williams is their leading receiver, 12 targets, 7 receptions, 61 yards. They have another guy, Bryce Farrell, who's he's kind of like a tiny jitterbug slot receiver. He has 5 catches for 68 yards, so he has the most yards, but there's no receiving touchdowns on this team yet. And they've played Hawaii, who they lost to on the road. They were up, I think, 17-0 at half, and then they basically let the Rainbow Warriors come back. And I think Hawaii's quarterback, I think he was pretty young. He might be a redshirt freshman, and he was basically playing the game on one leg, and they still let them come back and win. And then they go to BYU last week. They lose 27-3. Watching that game, they had a bunch of turnovers that gave BYU short field. So BYU is also playing a freshman quarterback who is actually a transfer from Stanford. It's Bear Bachmeier, the younger brother of Hank, who was the quarterback at Boise State, then Louisiana Tech, then Wake Forest. So it's his younger brother. And he's a true freshman. And BYU is doing a lot to make his life easier. They're not asking him to do a lot. And BYU still just basically did whatever they wanted on offense for the most part. And as the game got towards the end, they were kind of like, all right, we're going to just run the ball and take a break. And Stanford didn't score their field goal until the 4th quarter. So that game was never really in doubt. And BYU they had a fun year last year, but they were very inconsistent. Then Jake Retzlaff, their quarterback, has to transfer to Tulane for violating the honor code. So, and I don't think BYU has a ton of like great athletes or players. So it's not like they're getting demolished by a great team. Like BYU is a solid team, like probably on par with BC, and BYU handled them pretty easily. So the offense is not doing a lot. I will say their one bright spot is Micah Ford, their running back, who was a very highly rated recruit out of New Jersey. I think he played quarterback in high school, so he's kind of a Cam Akers type, but he's still doing okay. And they were able to run the ball very well against Hawaii, but against BYU, they could not really get anything going on the ground.
So this seems like a game that Tim Lewis is probably going to pin his ears back and just.
But so this is where I would wonder, because so also here's a few more things. So their starting right guard, who was probably their best / most consistent offensive lineman, got hurt last week and is out for this game. He might be out for the year. So they are plugging in one of their backup guards, Fisher Anderson, who has been pretty good in pass pro, at least according to PFF. Which I think their pass protection grade is pretty stable and pretty accurate, I would say, relative to the run blocking grade. So that's a problem. They've been rotating at the other guard position a little bit. So that's questionable. Their tackles have been bad, point blank, period. So I wonder if Tim Lewis is like, hey, we might be able to just get pressure with 4. We might not need to blitz. And we don't really need to worry about Gulbranson running, so we don't need to have a spy on him like they did against Michigan State, where they had McGowan spy a bit. They had Quintavious Hutchins spy a few times, which worked really well. So I feel like they're probably like, hey, we can just rush with 4 and maybe bait him into some interceptions, because BC still is, they've only had 1 interception. They got that pick 6 against Fordham, and I think they're going to be looking for some more. The secondary is going to be able to be aggressive. Again, this team doesn't have a lot of receiving talent. That CJ Williams receiver was a transfer from Wisconsin, where he was kind of okay. Their other slot receiver, Caden High, is a transfer from South Carolina State. They have another receiver transferred from Colorado, where he didn't play at all, which over the last few years of Colorado, like they are playing 10 personnel, 4 wide receivers all the time. If you couldn't get on the field at all, granted, they've had some NFL players, but it's like you haven't gotten anything. I'm like, okay, well, you got to get on the field at some point. Like, so I'm just like, I don't know what this offense is going to do, is going to even be able to do.
So you have no real concerns on there.
I think the one thing is like I think they're just going to want to try to run the ball because Micah Ford is a very good player. So that's really the guy you have to feed. I'm wondering if they do make a quarterback change, go with Elijah Brown, who was a pretty highly rated recruit from California. I think there was some thinking that he was going to be the starter. The other person is Dylan Rizek, who's a transfer from UCF, who had some moments for the Knights last year, but they bring in Branson because he's experienced. He knows how to run a pro style offense. He actually was at Oregon State previously, so he's kind of off the Jonathan Smith tree, but he's again not anywhere near as good of an athlete as Aiden Childs. So they might make a quarterback change. I think they're probably going to try to ride with Branson again just to see if he can keep the ship steady. But it's just been brutal, and again, not against the best competition. Like Hawaii was giving him fits, BYU was killing him. So there's just not a lot going on with this offense.
So the big question we're going to talk about in just a second is how's this defense and how are they going to be able to stop Dylan Larnagin? We'll get into that in just a moment. You can just move through life or you can find the things that move you. It's your choice. You can choose to get out there, choose your people. You can choose to go for it. Like really, go for it. Just choose to do something that moves you. Mazda crafts cars for those who choose to do more than simply move. Mazda, move and be moved. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, and even jumping in on live action as it unfolds. With college football and NFL on there during the football season, there's all sorts of action over the weekend. And it makes everything more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. So you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app today by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here, and thank you to all who have made Locked On Boston College your first day. And if it's your first listen every day, you know where you're at when you're getting your Boston College news here. And obviously, we brought a special Stanford football expert here today. And so we're wrapping things up here with Mitch. The defense seems like it's a bit better for Stanford. Still not the greatest, but what does the Cardinal defense look like? Mitch?
So Stanford's defense is a little better than their offense, not especially so. And once again, we have to consider who they've played. They've played Hawaii with a younger quarterback. Hawaii's a pretty bad group of 5, group of 6 team. Then they play BYU as his young quarterback. They have one good wide receiver in Chase Roberts. They have BYU's a decent team, but not world beaters by any stretch. And they basically haven't looked competitive. Their defense has had moments. They have some players that are okay. One would be Colin Wright, who is their cornerback. He actually missed the first game against Hawaii, came back against BYU, and he started. And he's playing. In the previous years, he's played in the slot. Now he's playing outside at boundary corner. He's pretty good. He's been solid throughout his entire Stanford career. The rest of the unit is pretty rough. Their defensive line doesn't get a lot of pressure, doesn't stop the run very well. Their linebackers, they lost both starting linebackers to, I think, graduation at the portal, or one with graduation, and both graduation. One went to the NFL or had an NFL tryout. So they've had moments, but it's nothing super special. Here we go. Okay, so they are 114th in defensive passing success rate at 51.2%. They're 108th in defensive overall success rate, 55.1%, and 89th in defensive rushing success rate, 58%. So it's all still below average, but it's not killing them, but it's nothing special. Watching their defense schematically, it's not very interesting. They play a lot of quarters. They don't blitz a lot. Even when they do blitz, I don't think it's very well disguised or schemed up. It's kind of just like we're putting a bunch of guys in the line and we're sending them all. It's like, okay, good luck, but it's just nothing super special. They're the 108th in pressure rate. They're tied with UMass. So, and they have said, to their credit, they've had 7 sacks the first 2 games. But again, the Hawaii quarterback was hurt, and the BYU quarterback is a true freshman. So I'm not saying they're BC last year with Donovan Ezeraku or BC in 2015.
So when they're not disguising their blitzing, that seems like Dylan Larnigan's going to eat that alive.
Yes, for sure. Now
he's going to see it and he's just going to go around it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I think both the previous quarterbacks they've played have had issues with, where there was a few plays where a guy is just coming unblocked off the edge, and it's like, okay, well, that's not something BC does. Like one of Bill O'Brien's biggest hallmarks is being able to get the right pass protection for any play. So that's going to be a big help for BC. If I'm Stanford and I'm playing BC, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow, but I think you just need to take the pass away first. You need to play coverage. You need to basically force BC to show that they can run the ball on you, because again, BC has not been consistent running the ball. Well, some would say they've been bad, but they looked better against Michigan State when they weren't so vanilla. They weren't just running the ball up the middle with very basic play calling. When they were able to open it up a bit, they showed some stuff. And again, some of their metrics were worse because of kind of random plays that, some of them didn't work. Some of them were just outliers, but BC, I think Stanford's going to basically say, like, we're going to put 6 in the box. We're going to play coverage. We're going to either make Lonergan beat us with his arm and tight window throws, or you guys are going to have to run the ball. So I think BC is going to take the bait there and run it, and basically say, we're now, this is our time to get the run game going, because Stanford's defense, they play with the light box a lot. Their defensive line is relatively undersized. Yeah, their linebackers are as well. So I think this is going to be I think, again, it's a challenge for BC. They need to prove that they can run the ball, but this is the right kind of opponent to do it against.
Right. So especially if they're doing light boxes, like if you're running against 4 or 5 guys, like BC should be able to run there. And if there's not, then that's a
5 or 6. Usually most teams are doing 4-man boxes.
No, 5 or 6. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like you should be able to run on that. Like, and if Turbo Richard is not productive, that's a big problem moving forward. But any other last thoughts on the defense, Stanford football expert?
Well, I'll say that they do have a pretty good they have an experienced kicker, at least. I believe he's a redshirt senior. He's been around a while. He kicked game-winning field goals last year against Syracuse and Louisville in their 2 FBS wins. So at least we know he's a good kicker, because usually it's the guys that we have never heard of or have some crazy story where it's like he hasn't kicked in 3 years. He, learned what football was yesterday. Now he kicks a 60-yarder. At least we know this guy's like, all right, he's good. Like, he'll probably kick he'll probably kick some decent field goals if they can get the red zone. But, if you look at every metric or look at every preview of the Stanford team, I got all my college football magazines, looking at all of them. All of them are picking Stanford at best 16th in the conference. They're rated at the very bottom of the Power 4. I think pretty much everybody would agree that this is the worst team in the Power 4. And looking at the roster, looking at who they played, it's just like hard to see. You don't see anything that it's like, yes, that's something I can depend on, rely upon to help this team win games. There's just nothing that they've really shown in the first 2 games that makes you think, yes, this can be something they can lean on to be a winning football team.
All right. On tomorrow's show, Mitch and I are going to give our predictions. Well, Mitch will be back. We won't see Stanford football expert anymore. But we're going to discuss our predictions for this game and talk about what we're expecting and dive in. Mitch, football expert, I messed up there. Did a great job. I could not find anyone better to talk about Stanford football. Where can people find your work?
Stanford Steve of ESPN was busy.
Stanford Steve was busy.
Didn't return our calls. Sam Schwartzstein had Thursday Night Football kicking off this week, so he had prior commitments.
My boss, when I first started at BC Interruption, Brian Favit, I believe, is an assistant AD now at Stanford. So
I should have gone that way.
but he's not going to be able to talk about anything. So, but So, anyways, Stanford football expert, go away for a second. Mitch, where can people find your work?
You can find me at Mitchell T. Wolf, WOLFE on Twitter. I'll have all of my matchup report done on Stanford, hopefully tomorrow or at latest Friday morning. Good weekend reading. Looking at Stanford. We have all the film reviews up for Michigan State. I'm still waiting on the film. I did request it, but we might get a special teams film review from the Michigan State game. We'll see if I can get that going in time, but got a lot of good writing on this past week for BC, and we'll be ready to get into previewing Stanford, which again, the biggest thing is how well do they handle the cross country travel. Other than that, I think BC is a good bit better at every positional matchup, and I think they're just better across the board, so they should not have a problem in this game.
So we'll talk about that tomorrow. If you want more of my work, it's up on Eagle Insider. I'll be covering the game and mainlining coffee all weekend because it's a 10:30 start. I'm going to be going live.
You got to do the time shift thing. You get the time shift app or whatever it was called to be on the team schedule.
I'm going to be going live at like 2 a.m. on Saturday, and hopefully you're going to come and join me too, folks out there. If you're an everydayer, you should be out there watching.
I was worried you were talking to me.
not Mitch. Mitch, go to bed. But anyway, all you listeners out there, you need to check that out. All right. We'll be back again tomorrow for another episode. Check me out on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, everything. I'm on all social medias. Find me at AJ Black, Eagle Insider, or Locked On BC. Thank you all, and this is Locked On Boston College, your team every day.